sign to do dinner at Cracker Barrel.
How about a country dinner plate?
It's time to create your country dinner plate.
September 12th, 2025. Cracker Barrel's stock crashes 11% in just 2 days, erasing nearly $100 million in market value. Investors panic, loyal fans erupt, and across social media, one question dominates. How did a simple logo change nearly destroy one of America's most beloved restaurant chains?
Honestly, the feedback's been overwhelmingly positive that people like what we're doing. Overwhelmingly positive.
Cracker Barrel is now under fire. Why? What did Cracker Barrel do? Well, they changed their logo. It is getting rid of historic IP in favor of something absolutely and ridiculously generic.
I am not a huge fan of the new logo. I think it's boring. Don't know what I think about the stores as much.
I mean, you can take a look at the new logo and you can determine quickly that it's an attempt to simplify, which is a trend that's going on right now. In other words, minimalization of what you're doing and a modernization to make things a little bit less cluttered. Now, of course, let me just give you quickly sort of rebrand or logo change 101 marketing. You definitely want to tweak a little bit. That's point number one. Point number two is you want to make sure that along with the change, you have the story ready. In other words, you have the narrative prepared to tell consumers why you're doing this and what's behind the change. And so if you don't do that, then you can see what we're seeing now, which is a lot of people filling the silence with respect to their negative reactions to the logo. And then point number three is to make sure, and I'm not sure if they did this or not, but you make sure you do a little tiny test of things with your most loyal customers, and you just get a pressure test to see how they react. Because if it's this kind of vehement sort of vitriol anger, you could probably pick that up in a smaller test and you can figure it out way before this spirals out of control in the way that it has.
For more than 5 decades, Cracker Barrel was the definition of comfort. A warm meal, a rocking chair, and a side of nostalgia that reminded millions of simpler times. But that comfort, that identity, was suddenly under threat. Because in 2025, Cracker Barrel decided it was time for a new era. A modern look, a cleaner logo, a fresh, inclusive tone for a new generation of diners. Only, it didn't land that way. The new minimalist logo erased the old man and the iconic barrel, symbols that had been part of the brand since 1969. Overnight, Cracker Barrel went from a beloved slice of Americana to a lightning rod in America's ongoing culture wars. One user on X wrote, quote, "They didn't just change the logo, they erased everything that made Cracker Barrel feel like home." By the end of the week, news outlets from Bloomberg to Fox Business were reporting the fallout. Traffic declined across the South and Midwest, the company's strongest markets. The hashtag #BringBackTheBarrel trended nationwide. Even worse, analysts at Reuters confirmed that same-store sales dipped 8% year over year, the steepest drop since the pandemic. The backlash wasn't just online noise. It was a real-time rebellion from the very audience Cracker Barrel had built its empire on. And here's the twist. This wasn't the first time the company had faced public outrage. In fact, this backlash was years in the making, fueled by controversies and corporate decisions that quietly eroded its identity long before the rebrand even occurred. But the question remains, how did a brand built on nostalgia and comfort lose touch with the very customers who made it iconic? To answer that question clearly, we have to go back to where it all began. A small roadside stop in Lebanon, Tennessee that dreamed of serving America one rocking chair at a time. When Cracker Barrel unveiled its new identity in August 2025, the goal was clear: attract younger diners and distance itself from what executives quietly called the dated country look. Behind the scenes, the leadership had been studying the success of brands like IHOP's 2018 I.O. campaign and Wendy's digital revival. They wanted a fresh, modern edge, something that could bridge tradition with progress. But what they didn't realize was that Cracker Barrel's tradition was the brand. Within 48 hours of the rebrand, customer sentiment dropped 27% on social media, according to Sprout social data. Longtime fans accused the company of selling out, and conservative media framed it as another example of corporate wokeness. Meanwhile, progressive audiences, the ones Cracker Barrel had hoped to reach, didn't exactly embrace it either. They viewed the change as performative. A viral comment on Reddit's r/brandfailures put it bluntly, quote, "Cracker Barrel is trying to be something it's not. People didn't go there for innovation. They went for cornbread and consistency." Internally, the brand was feeling the heat. An internal memo leaked to Business Insider showed executives scrambling to reaffirm brand identity while aligning with evolving consumer values. They were trying to stop the bleeding. The rebrand came just as the company was already under financial pressure. In its Q2 2025 earnings, Cracker Barrel reported a 6% revenue decline year over year, a drop executives initially blamed on inflation and rising labor costs. But by September, customer traffic in legacy markets like Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama was down nearly 10%, while younger markets, where Cracker Barrel expected growth, barely moved the needle. To make matters worse, competitors pounced. IHOP ran nostalgic ad campaigns reminding diners of classic family breakfasts. Bob Evans doubled down on its farm-fresh heritage messaging. Even Denny's, once mocked for being outdated, saw a 2.4% bump in store visits that same quarter. Cracker Barrel had tried to rewrite its story, but in doing so, it erased its own ending. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, old wounds began to reopen, because this wasn't the company's first brush with controversy. In fact, what happened next revealed just how fragile brand trust can be. By late 2025, Cracker Barrel was facing a storm of its own making. The rebrand had backfired spectacularly. Sales were falling, loyalty was cracking, and for the first time in over 2 decades, Cracker Barrel's stock dipped below $60, wiping out nearly $400 million in market value in just 3 months. But to understand the full fallout, you need to look at Cracker Barrel's history, because this wasn't a one-time slip. This was a pattern. Back in 2017, the brand faced national backlash after firing a manager's wife, known to the internet as Brad's wife. What started as a local HR decision exploded into one of the earliest viral cancel campaigns. Facebook pages like Justice for Brad's Wife drew over 90,000 supporters, forcing Cracker Barrel to issue public statements just to contain the outrage. And yet, instead of learning from those lessons, Cracker Barrel repeated them. In chasing relevance, they misunderstood what made them loved. Not trendiness, not modern decor, but comfort. As brand strategist Kara Swisher noted on her podcast, quote, Cracker Barrel's audience didn't want reinvention, they wanted reassurance. And that's what the company forgot. By the end of 2025, layoffs quietly hit corporate offices in Lebanon, Tennessee. Dozens of longtime managers were let go. And while the company tried to frame it as strategic restructuring, industry analysts saw it as something else entirely. A desperate move to stop financial bleeding. Meanwhile, rivals seized the moment. Bob Evans rolled out loyalty programs targeting disillusioned Cracker Barrel customers. IHOP reopened shuttered stores in small towns Cracker Barrel had once dominated. And Waffle House, once a late-night roadside diner, became a comfort food icon on TikTok, amassing millions of Gen Z fans. Cracker Barrel isn't dead, it's wounded, but not forgotten. The question now isn't whether it can rebrand again. It's whether it can rebuild trust, the kind that can't be bought, only earned back one rocking chair and biscuit at a time.